Hi, this is Misha, and we were just out shooting today a couple of interesting guns that really made a big splash on the market 3 years ago, and you really don't hear much about in 2017. These are both contract HK type guns. The first one is a POF MP5. This is a semi-automatic, and this is set up as a carbine version of an Mp5A2 in 9mm. And also a Zenith MKE Mp5k clone known as the Z5K. This is also a 9mm and obviously is a more compact version. These are both imports built at factories licensed by Heckler & Koch to produce their weapons. The POF started to appear around 2014, early summer, and the Zeniths have come in and out of the country for quite a number of years. Also in the shooting, you'll also see the POF, what is known as the SMG PK, which is essentially a reverse stretch Mp5k. That one belongs to Jay, and so I don't have it here at my place, but it's at his place. And we've done some videos on it too, but you'll see that one being fired too, and that's kind of a hybrid of these two. But you know me, I can't resist a history talk, even though this is really just about these imports, and we haven't talked about them in a while, and same time. The Mp5 was really the fourth member in a family, which began with the HK G3, which was adopted into West German Bundeswehr service in 1959. It was essentially a licensed production version of the SETME Model B, which itself was designed in Germany in a sense at the end of World War II. Now, I'm not going to go into too deep in the history of that in this video, because we have a couple of other videos, namely on the SETME Mars SETME Sporter. So if you're interested in the SETME development, which you honestly should be because it's really interesting, that's where this began. Basically, Germany tried out, or West Germany, tried out a few different guns. They were initially interested in the SETME in the mid-50s, but development was going too slow for them, so they selected the FN-FAL, designating it as the Gewehr 1, the G1, but then there was some political and whatnot falling outs between FN and West Germany, and so they reverted back to interest in the SETME in 1957, 1958, and they officially adopted a version of the SETME Model B as the G3 in 1959. It would go into production at Heckler & Koch as well as Rheinmetall and be Germany's standard issue battle rifle for a number of decades. Now, what I'm holding here is a Hellenic Greek import. This is an SAR-3. This is a semi-automatic version, but much like the original G3, it's in 7.62 NATO 308. It has a barrel just under 18 inches with the flash hider removed. We have a typical bayonet lug up here. This is actually patterned off the G3A3 with the more modernized furniture. The original G3s had wood. But what's interesting and what applies to the MP5 is this roller delayed locking system. We do not have any kind of bolt hold open. We just have the roller system. We feed from 20 round mags. Originally they were steel, later they would go to these alloy types, which are very good. We have diopter sights, we have a scope mount top. The A3 had a fixed stock. The A4 would have a collapsing stock. And there are many variations. The G3 was quite successful and was adopted by over 50 nations and manufactured in about half a dozen total. And again, many more use them. Next in the family was the HK32, which was another roller locked gun in 7.62x39. It never went much of anywhere. Primarily it was designed by Heckler & Koch for potential adoption in Finland, who was using the communist cartridge 7.62x39 M43 Soviet, but they ended up going with the RK62, what we know today as the Valmet. So the HK33 never went much of anywhere. Following that was the HK33. I think I might have just said 33. Sorry, HK32 never went much of anywhere. The HK33 came next. They went into development around 1964 and became commercially available around 1968. It was firing the then very new 223 Remington, what we know today is 5.56 by 45 NATO cartridge. It was an intermediate round, very new concept. Now what I'm holding here is a Century C93 Sporter. This is what I have in the shop to show you to represent an HK33. In fact, this gun is built from an HK33 parts kit on a new US barrel receiver, whereas the G3 would have a 17.75, 17.78 inch barrel. Originally, the HK33 would have a 15.3, so a little bit more carbine size. Has a lot of the same features, diopter sights. This one has the wide handguard. Early ones would have the narrow, and there would also be a version. The HK33A2 is the fixed stock here. The HK33A3 would be the collapser. There was also the HK33E, which was an enhanced model that appeared in the 70s. And really one of the most interesting things to me about the HK33 was that Harrington and Richardson, HRA, would produce a version in the US that would basically import German parts and assemble guns here. And these would be tried out by the US military, known as the T-223 in Vietnam in the mid-60s. They would send about 50, 60 over for some field testing. So the US actually looked into the HK33 and really used it to compare against the AR-15, the XM16E1, which was in the field at the time and having some issues. So those were the members of the family. Really about the same time they were working on the HK33, they began the HK54 project, which was a further scaled down version. We have the full-size G3, we have kind of the in-between, the HK33, and now we have initially what's known as the HK54, which is a further scaled down version to fire a 9x19 Luger Parabellum, later to be known as 9mm NATO. And this is obviously a much more compact gun. As I said, this is a semi-auto made by POF in Pakistan. It is very close to the original. We'll get into that. The original submachine gun would have, and I should have looked it up, I apologize, I always forget the decimal point. It's about an 8.5 inch barrel. I know I'm off by a couple of tenths of an inch there, so apologies, but an 8 and some change inch barrel. The original ones would have a different style of rear sight. They would have a slim handguard, some other just early changes. This gun was ready for the market in 1966, and interestingly, it was not ever adopted by the West German Bundeswehr. they used what they called the MP2, which was, of all things, an Israeli produced IMI Uzi. However, what became known once this went into service, the HK-54 became the MP5, it would see use by West German police, and it would see some use by some special forces in West Germany, and it would see enormous use all over the world. I mean, it was very, very successful. It's an interesting position in the submachine gun lineage, and we're going to do a video looking at the development of the submachine gun at a later date. But this one is very interesting. In some ways, it's kind of the last of a series, and in other ways, it's the first. One thing that makes it unique for a submachine gun, it still uses this roller delayed blowback, began with the G3. Well, really with the SETME and everything else. See? So it's not just a simple blowback. This gave it several advantages over open bolt submachine guns like the Uzi. For one, there's not really much of a risk of dropping the gun, the bolt recoiling back, and accidentally firing a cartridge, because we have a floating firing pin with a hammer behind it. So unless the hammer is released, it's not going to go off. The roller delayed system leads to better accuracy because of being a closed bolt. It also means you don't have to have as heavy of a bolt mass in here, which means the gun doesn't seesaw back and forth as much. You have less mass moving, and you can have a lighter return spring. Now, much like all these in the series, these guns are made to be pretty inexpensive. Like the Soviet AKM, this is a receiver made from stamped and bent steel. Now, instead of really being riveted together, most of it is welded together, and we do have a trunnion in the front. The back is just hollow. So mechanically, it's very simple. Much like in an AK, the only thing in any of these guns is a bolt group and a trigger pack. That's really, there's no gas system. They're very simple, which always leads to better reliability. So the MP5 started to appear in 1966, and HK would quickly expand the line. In 1974, they would introduce the MP5 SD, which had a shorter barrel of about 5.6 inches, with an integrated suppressor made out of lightweight aluminum alloy. Then we would go from the original straight mags to these curved mags around 1977. And in 1986, we would introduce the MP5N, which was a special version designed for the U.S. Navy and has been used by many others. It would have a different trigger pack. It would have not only the 3-lug for a suppressor, but also 1/2x28 threads on the muzzle. And is still quite popular today and very well known. They would do versions with different trigger packs. This has an earlier style that's metal with a polymer grip. They would do some that are a whole polymer pack. They would have 3-way, 4-way selectors. They would even have some with just 2-round burst, some that were semi-only. Because this is a modular unit down here, they could really just change it out as needed for the customer. And again, the stock is also very modular. Originally we had the fixed stock, and we had a version of the collapsing, very similar to the one on the G3. Later still, we would go to various side folding stocks, and even more recently, collapsing stocks that are more like an M4. So because there's just a single push pin holding this on, you just take your stock off. Ditto for this handguard. This is the later wide handguard, but you can put a slim one on it. You notice this cocking handle is fixed. It doesn't fold like on the G3 and the HK-33 types though. Now, having success with the MP5, in 1976, H&K, or today just HK I suppose, introduced the Mp5k, Mp5 KERS. which is a shortened version. Now we take the barrel down on this model to 4.5 inches. As you see, it's a flush fit with the front here. Now the original submachine gun will have a vertical grip. Because this is just a standard pistol, we can't have that on these. For the shorter barrel, we have a shorter cocking tube, shorter bolt. Interestingly, the back of the receiver is changed. They shortened it down by about 1/2 inch in the back. And we have a push pin on the bottom and a push pin on the top. And the trigger pack, the grip housing is shortened as well. This has the polymer housing, as you see. The rear sights are a little bit different. We have open notch instead of closed diopter. This is for the pistol version. The original MP5k did not have a buttstock. It did have a sling swivel. The idea was it was a machine pistol, an early version of a PDW, you might say, that could be carried under a coat or just carried for, security use that's small. They would usually issue it with a 15-round mag instead of the 30. This was the original version. In 1991, they did come up with an updated version, just known as the Mp5k Pdw, which would have a right side folding stock made under license for HK by Choate. And it would have an extended muzzle out to about 5.9 inches. And it would feature either a 3-lug adapter or a 3-lug and 1/2 by 28 threads. So the idea with the PDW was we had a stock and we have the ability to mount a suppressor. This was done at the request of military users mostly, but police have found it to be useful as well in certain situations. So there have been many versions, many more than I just didn't mention here even. But that gives you a brief rundown of the history of these critters. Most people don't realize that the MP5 is now over 50 years old as a design. Now, there are guys that live and breathe HK, and I'm sure they know more, so I don't want to overstep my own knowledge base. I just, have a general history of these critters. These two are very impressive to me because these are true contract imports. When the HK94 and later the SP89 came in back in the 80s, HK did a lot to make them civilian kosher. On the HK94, they had a 16-inch barrel. This one actually has the original length. I've just put on an extension to make it into a carbine. I can easily remove this. I'll get around to SBRing it one day. The original HK94 did not have either the 3-lug or 1/2 by 28 threads, nothing on the muzzle. They did accept standard 30-round mags. What they did not have was the paddle mag release. So what you had to use was the push button. Push it out here and you can see. Which is difficult for many to use. But the paddle release, which is what was originally intended, is quite reasonably ergonomic. The original didn't have the front push pin either. Instead, it had a shelf. And these are all changes that HK did to make these things civilian legal. And to satisfy not only the American government, but their own. So when the ATF and Customs allowed these to come in, it was pretty dang cool. You see here, the Zenith also has the paddle release and also has the push button, the push pin in the front here. What they do to make these semi-only, there is a blocking bar in the back of the receiver to keep a full auto bolt from going in. There's also a small shelf in the front that is located where an auto sear would go. So there's not a way to put an auto sear in. Otherwise, though, these are very close to original, which is very neat to me. Pakistan Ordnance Factory, POF, which was originally a British setup factory, or British assisted them in setting it up, obtained the license to produce various HK products, including the MP5. And in fact, this is roll marked on the top of the receiver, POF MP5, and then 14 for the year. So it is literally an MP5. This is not a clone or a parts gun. This is a contract built in a licensed factory using licensed tooling and all that. I'm not going to get into the whole HK thing back and forth. What I will say, this thing runs phenomenally. It's never jammed, failed. It seems like it'll eat really any kind of ammo. It's a very military grade gun. It's not overly pretty. The finish is very utilitarian. But I like that. I like military style guns, and that's exactly what the POF MP5 is. POF really did the minimum that the ATF required to make these into legal semi-autos. They come in with the short barrel as a pistol with an end cap instead of a buttstock. Obviously a stock goes right on. When you do that, you either need to SBR it or weld on an extension, though, to give the barrel a 16-inch length. But I'm just really impressed for, you know, it's a true MP5. It's not built from used parts. It's new condition parts when these come in. They're all HK spec. I've had no trouble getting HK stocks, mags, other parts to work with them, which is nice. And it just has that classic look. A lot of people put the collapsing stock on. I like the fixed stock because it looks like a small G3 with the fixed A2 on. Unfortunately, these have not been imported in very large numbers. POF only sends over a few hundred a year, it seems like. And they've only done a couple of versions. This one here, obviously. The one of J's, which is the K model. It has the full-size receiver, but then it has the short K front end. Interestingly, in the US we call this a reverse stretch, but in Pakistan they do manufacture a version in full auto select fire for military use with a collapsing stock known as the SMG PK for Pakistan. So that's neat. They kind of melded the two designs. I haven't actually seen a fresh batch of POFs in quite a while, so hopefully more might make it over. These are quite reasonably priced. They're under $1,500 new usually. They don't come with a heck of a lot, just a military manual, mag, cardboard box, but you know, $1,500 might sound like a lot, but if you've ever priced an MP5, you realize that that is a really decent price for a gun that is made well and will run and run and run. As to the Zenith Import, the MKE company in Turkey has been making MP5 since the 70s. The first ones to come in were imported by ATI, American Tactical Imports. They were a bit different from this. They would do a pistol full size with a 16-inch barrel. They would do a pistol version of the K, and they would do a carbine version of the full size. But they disappeared. They were only around 2011, give or take a year or two in that era. And then Zenith started to bring these in 2015. Obviously they do the K here. They do a version called the Z5P, which is the same as this exactly, except it has the extended muzzle with the 1/2 by 28 threads and 3 lug for attaching things. This is a pretty popular model. And they do a full-size model known as the Z5RS, which is very close to this POF here. It comes in as a pistol with a 8 and some change inch barrel. I like the Z5K because it is a true K-type gun, including the short receiver. and I think that's neat. And it has the correct castle style rear sight. This one too also runs very well. I've never had any problems out of it. Actually, the trigger is pretty dang nice on this for an HK type. These are a little more expensive than the POFs. The K types are around $1,600, at least that's around MSRP, $1,650. I've seen them cheaper at some places in more recent times. That said, they do come with 3 mags, cleaning kit, a hard case, other accessories, and they have a scope mount too. So you get some extra goodies. But I really kind of like the plain Jane version of the POF. But we just had them out shooting. Thought, we haven't talked about them in a while. Most people have kind of not really talked about them on YouTube, and it seemed like something worth revisiting and just kind of going over a little bit of the history and why we like them. The most of the reason we like them is they're MP5s and these run. You know, a lot of the US clones or copies either don't run or are well over $2,000. So, you know, take your pick there. Pick your poison. These are cheaper and just as reliable as an original HK from what we've seen. And I've had this gun here for over 2 years and this gun here for over 3 years. So we've had some time with them. And Jay has had his for just under 2 years. So we've put some time and we've tried just about every type of 9mm ammo on the market and have had no difficulties. If you have any questions or comments, please post them below. If you'd like to talk about your own MP5 type guns, that'd be great. We always like to chat in the comments if we can. And as always, this is Misha, and please tune in again next time for more hopefully unique and interesting videos. We'll catch you then.